But the thing that also happened as a result of gaining expertise in driving is that if somebody came to me at this point and said, "You've been driving for a long time, you can teach me," I actually would not know where to start. That list that I had, the checklist of the things that I needed to do in that order once I got in the car, that's gone in my mind. I do all those things, but I don't access that anymore. It's become automatic for me. And that is part of how we develop expertise in a skill, to the point that some people have actually talked about expertise as the movement to unconscious competence. So this model starts on the bottom left. That's where we get our students. We get them at a stage of unconscious incompetence. They come into my course, and they don't want to be in my course because maybe they had 2 weeks of statistics as a module in high school, and they think they know everything there needs to know about statistics, and they don't want to be there. And so the first step is to become conscious of their own incompetence. That stage is overwhelming. It can be an emotional stage. Maybe that's the point at which some people give up. And we'll look at some of those things in the modules about the affective domain. But if students persist through that stage, they gradually start building competence. One of my professors pointed out that between 2 and 3, that's the line where the semester ends. And there's some truth to that in the sense that you don't become an expert in 14 weeks. Obviously, you need to keep doing things over and over. But it is in that steep part of the learning curve where the more time you spend, you can actually see the returns of investment. Except your competence is very conscious at this point. People who do protocol studies of students at different stages, they say that students in stage 3, if I were to bring somebody back and sit them at a desk and give them a data analysis exercise, for instance, in statistics, they have a tendency to talk themselves through the process. And they would say things like, okay, the first thing we always do in class when we have data is we plot it. So let me look at the pull-down menu for the graphs. Bar plot, pie chart, scatter plot. Okay, that's the one that we need because it's that kind of data. Okay, so then we do some exploratory data analysis. So let me get that pull-down menu. And so it's as if the working memory is so taxed that actually verbalizing those concepts out loud functions as having a little memory stick that can increase the memory capacity. Gradually, as they move on toward number 4, that becomes reincorporated back and it's now unconscious. Like when I'm driving, I don't think about necessarily all the little things that I'm doing while I'm driving. Likewise, somebody who's really competent in their field doesn't give their full attention to what they're doing in the sense that things happen automatically. So as a statistician, my natural, or second nature, I should say, my second nature inclination, because it's been rehearsed and practiced for so long now, is to look at the world in terms of variability. In any situation, I look at what's going on, why is this group behaving differently than this group. So I try to explain, I try to measure, I try to predict that variability. And I couldn't avoid doing that if I wanted to. It's become part of how I look at the world. In fact, in common language, we say, when somebody's at this stage, oh, they can do it in their sleep, basically, signaling the same idea that we're not directing all of our attentional capacities to that task because it's been very rehearsed. Now, it turns out this is a model of performance. And so the ideal stage for performance is number 4. If I had to have a procedure, medical procedure, I want to go to the surgeon who can do it in their sleep. I don't want to go to the surgeon who's competent, but who's going to cut me open and say, okay, well, the first thing we did in med school when we cut somebody open was to, so let's do that, but careful, let's not go far down to the pancreas. That wouldn't work, obviously. But that stage that is such a blessing for performance, number 4, can be sometimes a hindrance in our teaching. when we're so practiced that we're traveling at such a high altitude that we no longer see the little details that the students are struggling with. And so now you have unconsciously competent professors talking to unconsciously incompetent students, and that's two unconsciousnesses talking to each other doesn't make for very good communication and, as a result, learning. It's almost as if you want to transcend to stage 5, where you retain all your consciousness, but you reach back into stages 3 and 2, remembering how hard it was when you were learning it the first time. Which parts were hard exactly, and how were they hard? Did this piece take more time? Did this piece take more practice? Did this piece was just conceptually harder? Was it counterintuitive? You thought it was going to be this way, it actually ended up being the opposite. And when you can signal all those things to the students to help them build their competence that way. So the idea is that as experts, part of being an expert means building an expert blind spot. There's no way to get rid of that blind spot. And in fact, it's something that helps you function at high levels. But you want to be on the lookout for that in teaching situations. That is also why in some studies, some students report that they prefer their graduate students to their instructors, because graduate students are not all the way there in terms of their trajectory to expertise. And so they have a much easier time reaching back and coaching the students on the little step and giving them all those little instructional cues that they need. And so back to the car example, you can see how that story maps onto some of the stages. So what's important there? It's important that the driver, it's important that I had a lot of opportunities to practice, and I received a lot of feedback from the instructor. So much so that some researchers in the field say that it is not teaching that causes learning, but it's actually the learners themselves who cause their own learning when they attempt to perform, depending on the quality of feedback and depending on the opportunities they have to incorporate that feedback into further practice. Now, an interesting feature of that is that a car is a dangerous element. You could kill people, you could kill yourself if you do it wrong. So it really helps that cars in driving school have dual controls. So the instructor can take over if you're doing something really wrong. And so that creates a safe space for the learner to practice and to attempt new things. And so that's something, that's a similar thing that we're trying to recreate in our courses, creating safe opportunities for students to practice so that we can give them the best feedback that we can about their learning. What is the best feedback? Well, it's about finding out where the students are and then targeting the next level where they can go to. But first you need to know where they are. And so the thing about learning is that we don't get to see it. Learning happens in the brain. Learning is a biological process about rewiring our neural connections in the brain. So we can only see how students are learning by looking at what they do. The picture on the screen is an X-ray of a laptop. You can only see what's inside the laptop if you develop tools that will allow you to do that, whether it's an X-ray or whether it's a screwdriver, and then you can take it apart and put it back together. Similarly, if we are trying to do the same thing, reveal the learning so that we can target the feedback to get to the next stage, we are going to need tools that allow us to surface where the student is at, what stage of expertise they are, so that we can build them to the next stage.